Hello. Today we're going to go through converting between fractions and decimals. So the first thing I want to do, because I don't know where you're starting from, is we're going to look at what each of these things are. So a fraction has two parts. The top number is a numerator. This is where we count how many bits, how many things we have. And the bottom number is a denominator. So that's how many of those bits it would take to add to 1, which tells us how big the bits are, right? So let's look at some examples here. 2/3. So 3/3 would make 1, right? So we have 3 that make 1, but we only have 2 of them. So we have 2/3. 1/2. 2 halves would make 1. So there's two things. So they're bigger than thirds, but we only have 1 of them. 5/20ths. So here, we could also say 5/2. That might be easier. 20 of these would make 1. So you can see if this stick here is 1, it's like a ruler. There are 20 20ths. And we have 5 of them. So we have these 5 here. Now we'll come back to this in a moment, but you can notice here that 5/20ths equals 1/4, right? That's 1/4 of the whole ruler. All right, 1/10. So 10 of these would make 1, and we have 1 of them. All right. So that's a bit about what fractions are. Now let's look at decimals. So when we look at decimals, we learn about the place values of numbers. Now I remember learning about the place values of numbers. I was at school in Garbutt Public School in Townsville in Queensland, Australia, and this is what we learned. This is what everyone would learn. This here is the ones place. This here is the tens place. This is the hundreds, the thousandths, and the 10,000ths. Sorry, hundreds, thousands, and 10,000s. And we can see that here. 10,000s column, thousands column, hundreds column, tens column, ones column. Then on the other side of the decimal, we have tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and 10,000ths. All right, so let's look at some examples of some decimals here. So to start with, 1/10, which can also be written as the fraction 1/10. This is 10 times smaller than 1. So if this bar here is 1, if this is 1 chocolate bar, this is 1/10 of it. 1/100th. So this can be written as the fraction 1/100. Now I couldn't write 100. I couldn't draw 100 equally spaced lines here. So I said, imagine 100 equal sections here, and just the very bottom of it, just 1/100th, one piece of those 100 sections is what we have here. We have 1/100th. All right, and the next one we have 25/100ths, 0.25. So we're looking at what position this last digit is in. That's the hundredths position, so we say 25/100ths. So again, I couldn't draw a bar with 100 pieces in it, but I've drawn in 10 pieces, so you can imagine each of these pieces is 10 smaller ones. So 25/100ths, or 0.25, is 2/10ths and then another 5/100ths. And you can see here that that is equal to 1/4. All right, here's another example. 0.0125, or 125 10,000ths. Now I know to say 10,000ths because I'm looking at the fives position, the position of the last decimal here, that 5. So when we have 0.0125, we put it over 10,000 because it's 10,000ths. 125 10,000ths simplifies down to 1/80th. And this is not to scale at all. I realize only now in retrospect that here what I've done a little image of is 0.125. This is 0.0125. So in fact, this would be 10 times smaller than that. So if you can imagine something 10 times smaller than that. So instead of being divided into 8 parts, this should be divided into 80 parts, and we just have one of them. All right, so Now, how do we convert a decimal to a fraction? Well, there's sort of two steps we do here. First, we look at the place value of the last digit, and we use this for our denominator. So here, the last digit was a 5, which had a place value of 10 thousandths. So we put 10,000 as our denominator. Then the number in the decimal becomes our numerator. So here we can ignore those zeros there. Here we have 125. If we wrote 2 zeros there, it would still be 125. That's our numerator. So let's look at some more examples. So if we have 0.5, that 5 is in the tenths position, so 10 is our denominator, and 5 is our numerator. And this simplifies to 1/2. We'll look at simplification in more detail in just a minute. We're going to go through converting decimals to fractions, then we'll look at fractions to decimals, and then we'll look at simplification. You will notice that I use simplification in a number of questions. I've always highlighted it in yellow where I've done it. So be aware that that's something we'll talk about soon. All right, 0.17. So that 7 is in the hundredths position. So I'm going to use 100 as my denominator, and I'm going to put 17 on top. And that actually doesn't simplify. 1.05. So this is 105. This will be our numerator, and our denominator will be 100 because the 5 is in the hundredths position. We're looking at the last digit here. So that's 105 over 100, and that simplifies to 21 twentieths, or 1 and 1/20th. We'll come back to simplification later. This 1 and 1/20th is a mixed number, so it's a whole number and a fraction together. We're not going to talk about those in this video, but just know that they get added together. So 1 whole and 1/20th gives us 21 twentieths. So that 1 whole is 20 twentieths. All right, moving on. 0.5. Well, that 5 is in the tenths position, so this is 5 over 10. That simplifies to 1/2. Did I already do this one? I did. I've done it twice. All right, 0.607. So what we're going to do is we look at the 7 being in the thousandths position. So we put 1,000 as our denominator. And then we put 607 in our numerator. Now, 607 and 1,000 do not share any common factors. So this is finished. We do not need to simplify. 0.625. Now again, our last digit is in the thousandths position. So I put 1,000 as our denominator and 625 in our numerator. Now, 625 and 1,000 do share a common factor. Their common factor is 125, and so that simplifies down to 5/8. 0.8. The 8 is in the tenths position, so 10 will be our denominator, and 8 will be our numerator, and this one simplifies. 0.3. The 3 is in the tenths position, so 10 is our denominator and 3 is our numerator, and this one does not simplify. 0.6. The 6 is in the tenths position, so we use 10 as our denominator and 6 as our numerator. This simplifies to 3/5. 0.375. So this 5 is in the 1,000ths position, so we use 1,000 as our denominator and we put 375 as our numerator. These also have a common factor. The same common factor is up here. The common factor down here will be 125. It simplifies to 3/8. Now this one, 0.3 repeater, this dot up here means the 3 repeats forever. This is one you should just memorize. It's a really useful one, but it's one that to turn this one into a fraction is a little bit harder because of the repeating decimal. So the answer is easiest if you just memorize that 1/3 is 0.3 repeater. It's 3's everywhere. It shouldn't be too hard. Last one, 0.25. So the 5 is in the 100ths position. So 100 is my denominator, and then 25 will be the numerator. And this one also simplifies. They have a common factor of 25. All right, so that's a lot of examples there. And so we've just gone through converting decimals to fractions. Now we started over here looking at what fractions are, and let's go into some detail about converting fractions to decimals. Now the first thing you always have to do is simplify your fraction. You can still do this if you don't simplify your fraction, but it will be harder. It's always easier if you simplify your fraction first. So remember, we're going to go over simplification in just a moment. Now, there are many ways to do this if you're stuck. You can experiment and try different things. As you get more practice, you'll begin to remember helpful equations, such as 1/2 is 0.5, 1/3 is 0.3 repeater. We were just talking about that. 1/4, 1/4 is 0.25, 1/5 is 0.2, 1/9 is 0.1 repeater, so that's 0.11111111111111111 forever, and finally 1/10 is 0.1. Okay, so one thing that you will notice here is that as our denominator is getting bigger, the number itself, and we can see in our decimal form, the number is getting smaller. So the bigger the denominator, generally, the smaller the number is. Okay, so our method for turning a fraction into a decimal is going to be to use division. So let's start with this first example up here. 1/7. To turn this into a decimal, we divide. So we want to look really quickly at how we say this. This can be 1/7. We can also say 1/7. Or we can also call this 1 divided by 7. And if someone asks you what is 1 divided by 7, you can give 1/7 as an answer, and that is correct. Unless they ask for it in the decimal form, in which case what we're going to do is we're going to divide 1 by 7. Now, this one, obviously when we do 7 into 1, it goes 0 times. So we put a decimal point after the 1. Make sure to put a decimal point above the decimal point here. So then we do 7 into 10, goes once, remainder 3, 7 into 30 goes 4 times, that's 28. The remainder will be 2. 7 goes into 20 twice, that's 14, so the remainder is 6. 7 goes into 60 8 times, into 56, with a remainder of 4. 7 goes into 45 times, 7 goes into 57 times, 7 goes into 10 once, and so on and so forth. So if you're struggling with the division, that's something separate that you need to work on. But what I noticed here is after I got to the 1, it went back to 4, and I can see that this is going to repeat again. So this 1/7 is 0. Whoops, didn't mean to move that. 0.14 rounded to 2 decimal places. Or if we don't round it, it's 0.142857 repeater. So there's a dot under the first digit that repeats and a dot, over the last digit that repeats. So that's 0.142857, 142857, 142857, 142857, and so on and so forth forever. All right, but we can round that to 0.14. Next one, 1/3. So we were looking at converting from the decimal to the fraction. It's a lot easier to go the other way. So 1/3, 1/3, or 1 divided by 3. If someone asks you what's 1 divided by 3, the answer is just 1/3. So if they want it in a decimal form, again, we have a division where 3 into 1 goes 0 times. So we need to add our decimal place here, and we add a decimal place above it. Then 3 goes into 10 3 times, so 9, with a remainder of 1. 3 goes into 10 3 times, remainder of 1. 3 goes into 10 3 times. And you can see that this will repeat. This will be 0.3 repeater. Or if we rounded it, we could call it just 0.3. All right. Next one. I tried to put in one that was a bit harder because I thought that those ones were a bit too basic. So 71/12. There's something interesting about this one. This is what's called an improper fraction because the top number is bigger than the bottom one. So normally this would be written as a mixed number, and we would write this as 5 and 11/12. But let's go 71 divided by 12. So again, we're going to have to go into the decimals. So 12 goes into 7 0 times, 12 goes into 71 5 times. We put our decimal and we carry our remainder of 11. So 12 goes into 110 9 times, remainder of 2. 12 goes into 20 once. Did I say that? No, that's right. Good, remainder of 8. 12 goes into 86 times, remainder 8. 86 times, remainder 8. So we get 0.59166666666 forever, so 5.916 repeater, or we can write that as 5.92 if we round to 2 decimal places. Now you'll note, because this is bigger than a 5 here, we round up. If you're not sure about rounding, don't stress. Rounding is another skill in and of itself. It's a very simple one once you learn it, but I'm not going over that in this video. So let's go through a few more quick examples. 4/5. So this is going to be 4 divided by 5. So we write that this way. 5 goes into 4 0 times, but 5 goes into 48. And remember, we put in our decimals, so that's 0.8. Now, if we had 8/10, this would simplify to 4/5, and we would actually get the same answer. So you can see here that simplifying first can save you work. If we had done 8 divided by 10, we would have gotten the same answer as well. 3/10. Now this is very close to 1/3, but it's not quite. So 3 divided by 10, 10 goes into 3 0 times, 10 goes into 33 times. And we've got our decimal points here, so that's 0.3. So notice 1/3 is 0.333333 repeater. If it's just 0.3, it is not 1/3, it is 3/10. Teachers will try and catch you with that one because they really want to make sure that you understand the difference. All right, 3/4, 3 divided by 4. 4 goes into 3 0 times, put our decimal points. 4 goes into 37 times, that's 28 with a remainder of 2. 4 goes into 25 times. We are done. 0.75 is 3/4. 3/6. This one we can simplify. It comes out as 1/2. You should know that 0.5, but I did it just for fun. 2 goes into 1 0 times. Put our decimal places. 2 goes into 10 5 times. So 0.5. Next, 3/5. So this is 3 divided by 5. So 5 goes into 3 0 times. We put our decimal places. And then 5 goes into 36 times. 0.6. 3/9. Now this one's cool. 3/9 simplifies. If I had simplified this, this would have been easier, but 3/9 simplifies to 1/3. And so you notice we get 0.3 repeater when it comes out. But we can do 3 divided by 9 as well. So 9 goes into 3 no times. We put our decimal places. 9 goes into 33 times because it goes into 27. So 3, remainder 3, 9 goes into 33 times, remainder 3, and we can see that this pattern will repeat. Last one, 5/6. So 5 divided by 6, 6 goes into 5 0 times. We put our decimal points. 6 goes into 58 times, that's 48. So a remainder of 2. 6 goes into 20. Whoa, that should be 3. 6 goes into 23 times. So 6 times 3 is 18. Hold on, let me fix this. Bear with me. Let's take this one from the top again. So we want to do, 5 divided by 6. So I know I'm going to need at least a few decimals there. So 6 goes into 5 0 times, put a decimal up the top. 6 goes into 58 times in 48, so a remainder of 2. 6 goes into 23 times with a remainder of 2. 6 goes into 23 times, remainder 2. All right, so we can see that this will be 0.83 repeater, or I'm just going to write the answer as 0.83 rounded to 2 decimal places. Okay, no dramas. Even I make mistakes sometimes. All right, so now we have looked at converting between fractions and decimals. We've looked over what a fraction is, what's the numerator, what's the denominator. We've looked at what a decimal is and what the different place values are and how the place values are really important for converting our decimals to fractions. Now, in a lot of cases, both in the fractions and in the decimals, we did some simplification. So, before we wrap up, I just want to go over simplifying fractions. Now, fractions can be simplified when the numerator and the denominator share a common factor. So in 5/20ths, 5 and 20 share a common factor of 5. So we can write that 5 over 20 is 1 times 5 over 4 times 5. Now take a moment to make sure that makes sense. 1 times 5 is 5, 4 times 5 is 20. So these are the same thing. Now we can rewrite that in two fractions, right? Because when we multiply fractions, this is all we do. We put them together. The numerators multiply in the numerator and the denominators multiply in the denominator. But this fraction here, 5 over 5, is equal to 1. Anything over itself or anything divided by itself equals 1. So all that's left is 1/4, because it's just 1/4 times 1. So that's how 5/20ths simplifies. Now, once you get comfortable with this, you can go straight from 5/20ths to 1/4. You don't need to write what's in the middle. But while you're getting comfortable, this is a really good thing to do, because that way, if you make a mistake on a test, your teacher can at least see what you were trying to do and can give you marks anyway. All right, so let's look at some other examples of simplifying. So if we have 75 over 100, these both have a factor of 25. So we have 3 times 25 on the top and 4 times 25 on the bottom. So again, those 25s can be written in their own fraction, and because we have the same numerator and denominator, this whole fraction just equals 1. This is 3/4 times 1. So 75 hundredths simplifies down to 3/4. So this only takes one step. In these cases, I've just done one step. I've pulled out a factor of 5 here. I've pulled out a factor of 25 here. It only takes one step if you find the largest common factor. But it can be done in smaller steps as well. So say you get 125 over 1,000 and you want to simplify this. So you might notice that both of these are divisible by 5. So the numerator is 25 times 5 and the denominator is 200 times 5. So that simplifies down to 25 over 200, because the 5 and the 5 cancel each other out, as we would say. They pull out into their own fraction where the same numbers on the top and the bottom. Then from 25 over 200, you might say, oh, there's another factor of 5. So you pull that out. You say the numerator is 5 times 5 and the denominator is 40 times 5. And these 5s here cancel out. Then we have 5 times 40, and we could say, well, the numerator is 1 times 5 and the denominator is 8 times 5. And so we could simplify this once more to get 1/8. And what I've put here is that we can do all of this in one step if we notice that this is 1 times 25. Sorry, I've got the wrong number written there. Our first number, our numerator, is 1 times 125, and our denominator is 8 times 125. So we have one amount of 125 up here, and 1,000 is 8 amounts of 125. So 125 is the largest common factor, and if we found that one first, we could have done all of this in one step instead of pulling out a factor of 5 3 times. We did it once here, and once here. All right, so here's another example. If we have 900 over 1,200, or 1,200, we can easily see the numerator is 9 times 100 and the denominator is 12 times 100. So we can get rid of the 100ths. Then we have 9 over 12. So 9 is 3 times 3, and 12 is 4 times 3, and that simplifies to 3/4. And we could have seen that there's a common factor of 300. So we could have done 3 times 300 is 900, and 4 times 300 is 1,200, and we could have skipped straight to the end instead of doing it in 2 steps. So you can see that when you're simplifying, if you don't find the biggest common factor, just look for any one you could find. If I had pulled out a common factor of 2 to start with, if I had done 900 and 1,200 both divided by 2, or done them both divided by 10, I still would eventually have gotten to the same answer at the end. All right, next example, 8 divided by 10. So this is 4 times 2 over 5 times 2, or 4/5. So this one came up over here. we had to simplify 8/10 to 4/5 in order to realize that it was the same question we had just done. All right, 3/6. 1 times 3 over 2 times 3, so that's 1 over 2. 105 over 100. Well, this is 21 amounts of 5, and this is 20 amounts of 5, so this is 21 over 20. 5/10 or 5 over 10. That's 1 times 5 and 2 times 5, 1/2. 625 over 1,000. Now these have a common factor of 125, but I did it in smaller steps. I pulled out a common factor of 25 first. So this is 25 amounts of 25, and this is 40 amounts of 25, and then this is 5 amounts of 5 and 8 amounts of 5, so we get 5/8. 6/10. Well, that's 3 times 2 over 5 times 2, so that's 3 over 5. 375 over 1,000. Again, this common factor of 125. This is coming up because this is an eighth. 8 amounts of this go into 1,000. So, in fact, you might recall that when we were looking at the decimals up here, I showed you that 125 out of 10,000, so no, this is, don't ignore that, this is wrong. This should be 1,000 here. So this is 0.125. This is 1/8 of 1, or 125 is 1/8 of the way to 1,000. This number is wrong. If you recall, I made a mistake when I was making this. Okay, back to where we were, simplifying. We just did 375 over 1,000, that's 3/8. 3 amounts of 125 over 8 amounts of 125. 25 over 100, so this is 5 times 5 over 20 times 5. And then we can simplify again, this is 1 times 5 over 4 times 5. We get 1/4. All right, so that's everything that I have here for converting between fractions and decimals. Now, that should be a good start for you. There are a lot of tips and tricks, and the more you do it, the more you'll realize that by remembering a few important ones, you can make your life a lot easier and save yourself a lot of the busy work. I would recommend doing as much practice as you can, and anytime you encounter a decimal, see if you can make it a fraction, and anytime you encounter a fraction, see if you can simplify it, and if you can make it a decimal. The practice you get when you're simplifying fractions and doing these conversions is lots of practice with your times tables and getting good at knowing what factors certain numbers have, and those things are super important for everything that comes later in maths. So, converting between fractions and decimals. To go from a fraction to a decimal, we simplify the fraction and then we divide. Numerator divided by denominator. We looked at a lot of examples of those. The ones I did were perhaps harder than the later examples here. And then to convert a decimal to a fraction, we look at the place value of the last digit. So here, that's a 5 in 1.05. And we use that as our denominator. So the last digit is a 5. It's in the hundredths place. So we put 100 as our denominator. And then this 105 comes from just reading the digits in order, 105. This is 105 hundredths, or 1 and 1/20th, because 0.05 is 1/20th. All right. I'll wrap up there. If you have any questions, feel free to send them through, leave them as a comment, let me know, or if there's anything else you would like a video explaining, I'm happy to make one for you as well.